I feel like every video is gonna basically start out by me just sitting at my dining room table. I just finished eating breakfast and still kind of waiting for my hair to dry a little bit. I'm trying to be better about letting it air dry rather than constantly doing so much heat to it. Today I have a really exciting recipe for you. We're making biskvi cookies, and in Swedish they're just called biskvier. And it's basically like gluten-free. Actually, I don't know if they're all gluten-free, but for the most part they're gluten-free almond cookies. And then you have this buttercream on top, and then you dip it in chocolate. And then in this recipe we're doing a little flaky sea salt. People do all different types of versions. For Christmas people do like saffron biscuits. You can do a chocolate one, you can do raspberry one with white chocolate, truly anything. When I was trying to think of the type of recipe that I wanted, I felt myself like wanting to get super creative, but then I was like, wait, the original is really good. Honestly, I feel like it's more common to make a chocolate biscuit with the almond cookie and then chocolate buttercream and then chocolate, but this vanilla buttercream one is also super classic and it is just so good. And honestly, I love chocolate. I love chocolate bars and whatnot, but I actually tend to not like chocolate desserts as much. So like a chocolate cake is good, but like chocolate mousse is kind of mid, I think. And then like chocolate torts or the flourless cakes, I'm like, I'll have like a few bites, but it's never really my favorite. I usually like a really vanilla forward baked good, so that's what we're doing. If you don't have vanilla bean paste, you could definitely use vanilla extract or a potential, I wouldn't say they're cheaper because vanilla beans are still really expensive, but you can order them on Amazon for not that much. I would use vanilla beans instead of vanilla extract just because it just gives you that extra like punchy vanilla flavor, and then you can also see the little vanilla bean specks in it, and I think it just adds a lot of richness. So you could also make these biskvi cookies 2 different ways, or you could make the filling 2 different ways. So sometimes people make like pretty much a Swiss meringue buttercream as the filling with egg whites, but I prefer the egg yolk version actually, which is basically a less sweet buttercream with egg yolk, and it makes this like really rich consistency and flavor. Obviously it does have raw egg yolk in it though, which I'm putting out a disclaimer here right now that you're eating raw egg yolk, so eat at your own risk. But I feel like chances are that you're actually gonna get sick are super, super low, knock on wood. So I would recommend doing the raw egg yolk version if it doesn't freak you out. Otherwise, you could do a Swiss meringue buttercream. I'm not gonna have a recipe for that in the recipe, but you could look one up and just make like a small batch or whatever. So I feel like I pretty much finalized the recipe the other day. Let me just look at, I need to find where I was in my notebook. Sometimes I am not always great about using like always the next page, so sometimes I will skip a few pages, which is not good, and I don't know why I do that. So let's see, yeah, like here I have my recipe for something else, full 2 empty pages, and then my other recipe, which I need to be better at because I'm gonna kind of lose my place. So for when I tested this, I actually tested the almond cookies a few different times. I think I made them 4 different times because I wanted to make sure that the ratios were right. And the first time I tried it with whole raw almond flour, so the flour that's a little bit darker and has the peel in it too. They were good, but I actually decided I didn't like the color. So you could use that though if you want. It works the same way. I did feel like though, for some reason, the blanched almond flour, so the totally pale one, didn't spread out as much, which is kind of interesting. And I think that just has to do with, it has something to do with peel and maybe how much of the liquid gets soaked up and whatnot. So I finalized those cookies and I tested it with 2 egg whites once. I tested it with 1 egg white and a little bit of water, and I found that 2 egg whites worked the best with the amount of almond flour that I used. And also I looked at a bunch of different Swedish biscuit recipes, and I watched some YouTubes. I try to do as much research as I can before I actually sometimes I will dive into the recipe first and then do research after I'm realizing that it's not going the way I want. But I try to do a lot of research before so that I can go into the recipe prepared. So I read a bunch of different recipes, and then I kind of wrote down a recipe that made sense for what I wanted. And then for the buttercream, so I do think I actually made the cookies. So usually, okay, I'm gonna use this for example. So usually, if you look at Swedish recipes, usually it would be, no, one cookie would be 2 inches, which is not a huge cookie, but keep in mind you're adding a decent amount of buttercream on top, and the buttercream that we're making is very butter heavy, so you're pretty much eating butter and egg yolk. So I was thinking that, you know, sometimes maybe you don't want a huge cookie, so I actually ended up making them more like 1.5 inches, like that size. Which you could obviously make them bigger if you want, but I did kind of like, and I also asked a friend who I gave them to, I was like, what do you think of the size? Should they be bigger, or do you think they were nice, or do you think they were good that size? And she said that she liked them small, which I think makes sense, because then you can have like your little, it's almost like a truffle. Like you have your cookie, and then you can always go in for a second or a third if you want. But I think if you're eating like a whole like big cookie with that much buttercream, it kind of feels like, not intimidating isn't the right word, but it maybe feels richer than like smaller cookies. So we're gonna make them kind of small. And then the buttercream, I made way more buttercream than I needed. So I did 2 sticks of butter. And then because I wanted to use up the 2 egg yolks from the other, from the almond cookies, but I just ended up with so much leftover buttercream. So for this time, I'm gonna half it. I'm gonna use 1 stick of butter, and then I'm actually gonna still use 2 yolks. I think it's just gonna add to the richness of it, and it also adds this like beautiful yellow color. So we're gonna do that, and then at the end you dip them in chocolate, and there's no tempering involved, which is great. I hate tempering chocolate. It's just like an annoying step, and especially for home cooks, it's like you want to just make something that's easy and you don't have to like fuss about. So you assemble the cookies, and then we put them in the fridge for a little because it's so butter heavy, and also the colder the cookies are, the quicker the chocolate is going to harden on the cookies. And then after we dip them in the chocolate, they go straight in the fridge, and then it hardens. And then when you take them out to room temperature, the chocolate is going to stay hardened for the most part. But the great thing is that you should just keep them in the fridge because they're, again, so butter heavy and the chocolate, so it's not like you have to keep them at room temperature. It's 10:25 right now, and I had hoped to get started at like 9:30, but this is actually pretty good. I kind of got a late start to the day. I actually already grabbed all my ingredients, which are very few. We'll go over them. I think you'll be surprised by how easy this recipe is, but how fancy and good they look, and also how delicious they are. So one thing I have not done yet is preheat the oven. So I'm gonna, did it go on? It's always hard to tell with my oven because there's no light on, so I always have to just like listen to see if I can hear the gas. So I'm turning it on to 350. This is truly all we need. Sugar, little almond flour. This is chocolate that I used the other day, but I didn't want to throw it out, so I'm gonna use the rest of that. And then I have some more eggs, butter, vanilla, and then we're gonna also use powdered sugar, but that is literally it. Okay, so I have the oven preheating. Obviously, we just did that. And now I'm gonna make the almond cookies, and seriously, these are so easy. In my opinion, so they are gluten-free, so you could make them to just eat. In my opinion, they're a little bit boring as just a cookie. This is super fine almond flour. You could also just grind your own almonds. It would be the same weight, I think. Yeah, it should be. I have like a few different versions written down, but I think I'm following the right one. Okay, I might actually not have enough sugar, so let's see. Oh, wow. Okay, literally exactly 101 grams, which we needed 100, so that's perfect. It's so easy for me to run in the store because it's literally like a 3-minute walk, but I prefer not to. I'm gonna separate the eggs. So I have 2 whites and, oh, it's split, but that's okay. And then again, save the yolks for the buttercream. If you only happen to have 1 egg, that's actually okay, because you could substitute in a little bit of water. I would start with a tablespoon, because it's not gonna make the biggest difference, especially since it's just gonna be that like bottom cookie. And just a pinch of salt, nothing more, because you don't want it to be too salty, and we're not working with a ton of ingredients, so just a little bit. And then the best thing about this recipe is that you don't need to whip the egg whites, which is obvious because we already added them to all of this. Literally just use a fork and mix it together. You want it to be loose enough to pipe it, but not so loose that it's gonna spread a lot when it's baking. This is what you're looking for. I took out 2 piping bags on accident, but that's actually fine because we're gonna need 1 for the cookies and then 1 for the frosting. If you don't have piping bags, you can use a Ziploc, or you can also just use 2 spoons and dollop the almond mixture onto baking sheets. I'm using a small baking sheet only because this is all that fits in my oven. I would recommend just using a big one. That way you can get more cookies on there at once. You'll definitely need some parchment paper or one of those Silpat mats. And it bothers me when there's overhang and you have to fold it, because if you don't, sometimes it can change, or it can make the cookies not as flat. So definitely either cut it off or just give it a little fold. You don't actually need a piping tip. Again, you could use spoons, or you could use a Ziploc, or you could literally just snip off a little end. But I have this, I want to say it's maybe like a 1/3 of an inch. I don't know, it's so hard to actually tell measurements by the eye. But anything round will do. For some reason, our kitchen scissors and shears are both gone, which I don't understand how happened because we have such a small kitchen. So I've been using my hair scissors as my kitchen scissors recently, which is not ideal because I actually use these to like trim my eyebrows and cut off split ends and stuff like that. So I need to now get a new one. And this is also too small. Like, I can't cut chicken or anything with this. Okay, so I'm just gonna take all of this almond dough, and it's essentially really just an almond paste. A lot of recipes in Sweden actually call for almond paste that you buy, mandelmassa, and which is kind of like it's different than marzipan because it's a little, I think it has more sugar. I can't remember exactly what the difference is, but there's a difference, and it's used a lot in Swedish baking. Okay, changing the angle a little so you guys can see better. Now I'm basically gonna try to just make, I'm gonna measure these actually. Okay, yes, that is about 1.5 inches, and this is not gonna spread too much, but if it does, then I think like that's good, because then you get like not the tiniest cookie, but slightly bigger. So I would aim for 1.5 inches and then hope that these spread to maybe like 1 3/4 inches. And I'm not pressing down too much. I'm kind of just holding it in one place and letting it kind of come out. And again, they're really not gonna spread that much in the oven, but I would space them out at least 1 inch, just in case. So I actually went in and added just a tiny bit more to some of them, but they're still just around an inch. I think they're like 1 3/4 inches, but make them whatever size you want, honestly. I have a little left, so I'm gonna bake these and then I'm gonna bake the rest. And you see they kind of have a little tips. you can either wet your fingers and press it down, or you don't have to do that because it's gonna settle as it bakes. I'm like a broken record with my oven. The tops should get nice and golden brown. Mine are not gonna get that way because all the heat comes from the bottom and again, circulates so poorly. But your cookies should be kind of like nice and golden brown on the top and very golden brown on the bottom. And they shouldn't spread out too much. And you'll know when they bake, and they're gonna be, I like them like slightly chewy and underbaked on the bottom, but if you don't want that, you can bake them for a little bit longer. So I bake mine for like 15 to 18 minutes. You could bake them for up to like 20 to, I'd probably stop at 20, but just keep an eye on them. And whatever texture you want them to be, you can just bake them like a little shorter or a little longer. Okay, the second batch of cookies just came out of the oven, and I actually ended up baking them for a little bit longer than I said. I think I baked these a total of 20 minutes. So I would actually change my time answer from 15 to 18 to 20 to 22. And they're still, I think, gonna be kind of chewy and a little bit underbaked on the inside. So I think this is actually the perfect amount, and they look a little bit darker than the last. I mean, they don't look very dark here in the video, but in person they look a little bit more golden brown than the first time I made them. And then here I have just a cooling rack with the rest of them, so I'm gonna let these cool. And luckily they're pretty small, so they're not gonna take too long to cool. And I might also just pop them in the fridge for a little bit just to help speed that up. For the buttercream, you're definitely gonna need an electric mixer. If you don't have an electric mixer and you just do it by hand, it's just, you're not gonna end up with a fluffy and a frosting. But I feel like also if you are making this recipe, chances are that you probably have an electric mixer of some sort. You don't need a stand mixer, although I prefer using one just because my handheld one, it's a little too fast, so even the lowest setting will be really fast, and then it kind of like flicks butter everywhere. So I prefer to just use this one whenever I can. Easy cleanup, and it's always on my counter anyway, so I don't really have to take anything out. So, okay, this butter, I need to pop this in the microwave for just another, actually, I think it's okay. Yeah, I think this is okay. So, as I said, the last time I tested this, I did 2 sticks of butter. I am decreasing that to just 1. And then because I hate throwing away food and it's only gonna make this recipe better, I'm gonna add both the egg yolks. A very generous amount of, actually not like I'm exaggerating, but a solid, that was probably more than a teaspoon. Use however much you want, but the more vanilla the better. You also want to see the specks. I know I mentioned that at the beginning, but add enough so that you can see them. Okay, I'm adding about 1/8 of a teaspoon kosher salt. Don't skip the salt. If you only have table salt, use a little less, maybe a slightly smaller pinch, and then you can always add more as you go. I'm trying to remember how much powdered sugar weighs in grams because I did not write that down. And I'm also having the recipe, so I did 1.5 cups last time, so I'm doing 3/4 of a cup. Okay, did the math. I need 84 grams. It's a little bit more, but that's okay. Now I'm gonna whip this until it's super light and fluffy. Definitely whip for probably at least 5 minutes. The more you incorporate, or the more you whip, the more air you incorporate, and the less it's gonna taste like straight butter, because we're not using that much sugar. So normally in a buttercream, you'd have about a stick of butter, and then you could have upwards of like 2 cups of powdered sugar, maybe sometimes more, depending. Then those are really sweet buttercreams. This is gonna be a really buttery, less sweet buttercream. So unless you want it to taste really buttery, I know I'm repeating myself, but just keep whipping. And then you're also gonna end up with more filling, like more volume. So you'll have enough for all the cookies. And then obviously you just want to make sure to go stop and then scrape down the sides so you get everything mixed in. Okay, so this is what it should look like. Super, super pale. You can see the little specks of vanilla. I don't know if you can in the camera, but you can in person. And really fluffy. So I am just using the same piping tip as before, just give it a nice wash. Again, you don't have to use a piping tip. I know I already showed it to you, but look at how fluffy, and this buttercream is just, it's so good. I love that it's not so sweet, because American buttercream is so, it's like almost cloyingly sweet sometimes, even though I still like it, but this just tastes more like, it tastes less like frosting, which I like. Okay, so just gonna add it right in there. You could make this ahead of time. You could make both of the parts ahead of time. The cookies, I would recommend storing in like a Ziploc or something. Oh God, I'm having trouble getting the frosting out. It's a little bit too warm in my apartment right now. I think that's the issue. If you make the buttercream ahead, definitely you're gonna have to bring it to room temperature and then whip it before you use it. So honestly, there's not really a big point in making it ahead anyway, because there's just few ingredients, but just in case. Just make sure there are no big air bubbles. And then, okay, I'm gonna turn this down a little. I'm gonna flip all of these over. You can see how nice of a color they have on the bottom. So I ended up with 21 cookies. You'll probably end up between 20 and 22, depending on your size. This is actually the perfect size. They're a little bit bigger than the first ones I made, but not too big. Kind of like that. Oh, it's so cute. Obsessed. And we're gonna smooth it out after, but I'm gonna add all the buttercream to all the cookies first. And if you're nervous about running out, you can always start with a little less and then go back at the end with the remaining buttercream. I ended up with just a little extra, so I'm gonna go into some of the ones that have a little less and just top them off. What we're doing now is we have this, and we're gonna shape it into kind of like a pyramid or triangle. So you just go straight down. Take some concentration. You're gonna need a little cup or bowl to just scrape off the excess. And just make sure to stay kind of in this middle so you still, or do the same angle all around, I guess. It's a little bit finicky, but the chocolate kind of helps cover up any flaws or any dents or anything, so don't worry about it being too straight. Like this one, let's see if I can focus it. This one, it's pretty straight, but I don't know if you can see, but there's like a few kind of folds or like a few less perfect areas. As soon as we dip them in chocolate, that will be, you won't be able to see it. I'm gonna finish the rest of these, and then we're gonna melt some chocolate and dip them and sprinkle them with some sea salt. And also this part does take some time because you wanna make sure you're doing it right. So I like to put on a little music or a podcast and just kind of zone out and do it. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I might listen to Therapist, I think that's what it's called, Jake Shane's podcast. It's so funny and he's just so silly and I love him. I finished all of them. It's probably hard to tell from where you are, but some of them are taller, some of them are shorter. It depends on how much buttercream you add, and I actually ended up with not that much extra buttercream. So as you go and you end up with extra on sides, you can add it to the following if you feel like it doesn't have enough. That way you don't end up throwing away like a bunch of it. As I said before, I have a little bit of chocolate here from the last time I made it. I didn't want to throw it away. I'm gonna melt it with the new chocolate. You want there to be like a deeper layer of chocolate without having to use a ton of chocolate. It has to obviously be able to fit the width of the cookie, but if you have something a little thinner and deeper, then it's easier to dip the cookies. So really all you need is one of these bars. I'm using 70% because that is not too dark, not too sweet. You definitely need a good quality chocolate when it comes to dipping stuff though, because then it does harden a little bit better. If you're using chocolate chips, then you kind of have to temper them, because a lot of those like chocolate chips and less high quality chocolate has other additives in it that make it so it doesn't harden as easily as something like this. So yeah, all you need is like 100 grams, maybe a little less even. Actually use up a little extra of this bar that I had. You could also use a double boiler if you don't have a microwave, which I know a lot of people in New York don't. And then just microwave it for, I don't know, in like 30-second increments, 15 to 30-second increments until it's all melted. While the chocolate melts, I'm gonna show you a close-up of these. You can see now that they're not all the same height, which is totally fine. They look pretty much the same size anyway, and they're not perfectly smooth around the edges, but again, you're not gonna be able to tell once we add the chocolate. Also, forgot to mention this, but while the chocolate is melting, I'm gonna put the biskvi cookies in the fridge just so that the butter has a chance to kind of harden a little bit. The chocolate has to sit out for a little bit and cool anyway, so we need probably an extra 10 minutes or so. And also, the colder the buttercream is, the quicker the chocolate will harden and the less the butter will melt if the chocolate is at all warm. The chocolate has kind of cooled. It should at least not be warm to the touch. And then here are the kind of cold biscuit cookies. So, I'm actually gonna, for easy cleanup, I'm gonna just put a baking sheet right underneath. That way I don't have to clean up any spilled chocolate off the table. And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a fork, and the cookie is gonna be soft enough where you can prick it with a fork, and then you dip only the buttercream part. Don't dip the cookie, so dip until it just reaches the cookie part. And then just like let the excess chocolate fall off. It's okay if some of it drips out on the side, but you just want to try to get most of it off. And then just pop it off and then place it back on the baking tray. Okay, here you can see a little better. Going down most of the way. And then just let it fall off. This is probably the most fun part. It's so satisfying to just dip it in there and then watch it come out. How is it already 2? It's actually crazy. I swear these don't take this long to make. I feel like anytime I'm filming, it takes a lot longer because I have to stop and pause, and I'm also talking through each step. So honestly, if you make these should take you probably like an hour and a half. Because the butter was so cold, the chocolate's actually hardening faster than it did the other day. So I'm gonna go in and sprinkle these with a little bit of flaky salt so that it sticks before it has time to harden. Coming over from this side so that it's not so backlit, but I'm gonna go in, add a little flaky sea salt to all of them, and you can see that the chocolate really does like hide those weird little crevices. Now the chocolate just has to harden, and then we'll try one. And so I'm gonna put them in the fridge for a little bit. Probably only needs like 20 minutes. No, 10 maybe. They actually really did not need much time in the fridge. Literally 5 minutes. They're probably not that hard. They just look a little more dull now, so you can tell that it's not melted. But to make them like crunchy, you'd probably need maybe 20 minutes. But this is them. They are so adorable, and I'm actually so excited for you guys to make this recipe. It's a good one, and it's really easy. I'll show you guys this one. It's so cute. And you don't have to look at the bottom. It's gonna be face down anyway. But isn't that just the cutest thing ever? So as per usual, my camera is about to die. I'm gonna plate them, and this is actually a cake plate that my parents made. So they own a glass blowing factory in Burlington, Vermont. And we designed this kind of together. So they have this blue one, they have a red, a green, a yellow, and then a clear. And they are just so beautiful. So if you need a cake plate or you need like a wedding guest gift or something, go check them out. It's aoglass.com. I'll link it below too. They're really great for serving cakes or cookies like this, little pastries, really anything. Okay, I'm gonna have a bite. I can't even tell you how good these are. You have to make them. I'm gonna show you the inside. So here we have the inside. You can see this kind of like underbaked chewy almond cookie. And then in the inside, this luscious, rich egg yolk buttercream. And then obviously the chocolate is, I didn't let it sit in the fridge long enough. It should be harder than that. But then the sea salt and just, so good. If you have any questions at all, just comment below and I'll answer them. And thank you guys for watching. This is so fun. I loved making these.